and welcome to the program. I am Bisi Adebayo. On Tuesday this week, President Muhammadu Buhari unveiled the National Gas Program in Abuja, which will enable at least 40% of vehicles plying Nigerian roads to run on compressed natural gas. President Muhammadu Buhari, who joined the event virtually, says this is geared towards unlocking the potential of the country's huge gas resources to increase industrial power supply, raise living standards, and support sustainable economic growth and diversification. Let's see the report.
It's official. The federal government has thrown its weight to support the transition to cleaner, safer energy solutions for the consuming Nigerian public. Call it a jolly good ride for one of the country's economic enabler, the oil and gas sector, and you may not be wrong, as homegrown solutions are emerging across the country, whether it be the newly commissioned modular refinery in the southeast or the transition from carbon-emitting energy utilization to a green technology. The president is on hand to do the honors. Here at the country's capital, a catalyst is being triggered. The federal government is unveiling cars and passenger vehicles that has been converted from engines running on petrol to autogas or LPG and CNG.
As key strategy, I have directed the Minister of State, the Group Managing Director of the NNPC, and all managers of the Natural Gas Expansion Program to adopt a market-led approach in the implementation of their mandate. The program will focus on encouraging investments through the establishment of conducive and enabling environment in order to encourage and galvanize potential investors in the gas subsector of a resource-rich economy.
The initiative is envisaged to provide 2 million jobs per annum, promote skills acquisition, and enhance technology transfer and grow the nation's GDP.
Selected stations across all 36 states and the Federal Capital Territory will start the installation of facilities for gas products and conversion capabilities. The process is now well on course, as we can see today.
From this location, 15,000 other locations are in the offing, about 1 million conversion kits, and the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation is leading the charge.
NNPC is providing free conversion, will provide free conversion service in some selected NNPC retail stations to assist interested motorists switch from PMS to autogas, especially in areas with existing autogas service stations in the Federal Capital Territory, Kaduna, Kano, Kogi, Kwara, Ogun, Ondo, Oyo, Lagos, Edo, Delta, and Rivers State and Bayelsa State. NNPC is expanding this initiative to all NNPC retail stations across the nation, while assuring motorists of steady availability of autogas at competitive prices.
By the same stretch, this gas expansion project will boost utilization, provide additional choice of fuel, cheaper than the price of PMS, cleaner for our environment, and better for automobiles and other engines. Olo Phillips, Channels Television News.
Now, that's the focus of our conversation this morning. And joining me to discuss this is an oil and gas analyst, Mr. Balazaka, who joins us from our studio in Abuja. Good morning, and thank you for joining us this morning. Now, what impact do you think this initiative will have on the country's oil and gas industry, particularly our gas infrastructure?
Well, thank you for giving me this opportunity. I saw it, I heard about it, and I saw it. I appreciate the initiative of government, but most of the time, after the appreciation, the next thing to expect is the crystallization. Everything I heard about this initiative is to make sure there is this ease of transportation. But to the best of my knowledge, this is going to be an uphill task. But the best thing is to always be optimistic. You know, if you look at it very well, right from the days of coal, Nigeria is endowed with so much coal, you know, but because of one reason or the other, we felt we were moving away from fossil fuel. right, or energy, and we abandon coal. So many nations are still using coal to generate power and to generate so much revenues to drive their economies. And they are not only emerging nations, they are developed economies. We got ourselves in crude oil, right? And we felt one of the things to do was to see if we were going to refine. Today, we are not refining, and we're importing. Then at a point, we felt we needed to unbundle NEPA because we predicated that on the availability of gas to drive the gas turbines. Where are we today? And I'm seeing us now talking about compressed natural gas. I don't have a problem with that. Natural gas, of course, is a cleaner fossil fuel. But I want to tell you that, to the best of my knowledge, Nigeria today does not produce even the spoke of a bicycle. Nigeria cannot, despite the rubber plantations, Nigeria cannot claim to be producing the tire of a vehicle. We can't produce even the plug of a vehicle. We can't even produce the battery of a vehicle. What that simply tells me as a loyal Nigeria is that, we have enough resources, both natural, material, and human resources. If the economic managers manage the resources very well, then we are going to see productivity. But I'm not that kind of Nigerian, though I'm 100% loyal. I'm not a Nigerian who is just interested in paper economy. I am interested in practical economy, and I'm a realist. So I hope it crystallizes.
Now, if you say we have the resources, just like you mentioned, then why then do you believe that this is actually an uphill task?
It's an uphill task because, we talk about the elementaries when you're talking about growing an economy. You had crude oil, right? You are a member of a crude oil cartel, and you cannot produce distillates internally. You are importing. And we got to a point where we are made to understand that our country is not into the business of refining, and nobody can justify why other OPEC countries are doing better. And recently, even a neighboring country whose nameplate capacity, I'm talking about nameplate refining capacity, is like 1/20th of ours, and is a government-owned processing facility called a refinery. So the practical realities are there. Everything about us has always been hinged on corruption. But as far as I'm concerned, corruption is an attitude. Corruption is not a concept. You can throw away a bad attitude. Corruption is just a bad attitude. And even when you talk about restructuring mechanisms of an economy, privatization is a good restructuring mechanism. Liberalization is a restructuring mechanism. So is commercialization and deregulation. But sometimes you need to look at the peculiarities of your nation before deploying any of these mechanisms to take care of your country. As far as I am concerned, deregulation will do us more harm. And even though we have finally been made to accept that deregulation is the way to go in terms of the downstream sector of the Nigerian oil and gas, I have a very simple question. The deregulation we are now made to accept, is it an import-focused deregulation or internal domestication deregulation? If you cannot use the abundant natural gas you have to drive the gas turbines, become self-sufficiency in electricity, provide power so that you can have glut at the filling station, how can you be talking to me about compressed natural gas when in the first place you don't produce any cars, even spare parts you don't produce? When that crystallizes, how do we go about it? So we're talking about first principle here. If we were to be manufacturers of automobile, then I can see the angle we're coming from. And that was why I said, I don't believe in paper economic restructuring mechanisms. I believe in practical economic restructuring mechanisms.
Well, I also believe that we need to start from somewhere. Perhaps that's the angle the federal government is looking at it from. But then you talked about the regulation now. Do you actually think that this initiative is enough to cushion the impacts of the deregulation of the downstream sector on the citizens?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, the effect is going to be zero. And I stand to be contradicted. And the reasons are simple. If you feel the disposable income has been eroded due to inflation, right? And we know that we are not experiencing investment due to business climate hostilities. And we know that our government cannot invest because our government is not generating good revenues. And we also know that our export-import differential is near zero because we are exporting virtually nothing called produce or finished goods. What we need to do is to take steps that will cushion the pains. What Nigerians are going through is basically economic pains. And one of the things we are not getting, apart from the insecurity that has ravaged all economic indices, is we're not seeing power. So, and how do you generate power? When you wanted to unbundle NEPA as our economic managers or national leaders, you predicated it on the availability of natural gas. The natural gas is there now, and we cannot see abundance of power. The same natural gas, we know from natural gas you can get ammonia. From ammonia, you can get urea. From urea, you can get fertilizer, and there will be food sufficiency. But as I speak today, let anybody tell me how much the price of fertilizer costs today compared to 10 years ago. And it's also supposed to be gotten from natural gas. You didn't use the natural gas to drive turbines to generate electricity for your citizens so that they will have abundance of electricity and forget about the petrol so that there will be glut at the filling stations. We didn't use the natural gas to make sure there is sufficiency in fertilizer production, whether the granular fertilizer or the liquid fertilizer. The price of fertilizer is still rising. So if we can talk about this, then how can I get convinced, though I'm an optimist, that we want to go into compressed natural gas, when even we know that we have not started producing the spoke of a bicycle. If we had started from producing spoke of a bicycle, then we now went to motorcycles, then we went to tricycles, then you can see the graduation. Every loyal Nigerian will want to be an optimist. But if I see an economy that is driving towards the cliff and almost trying to fall into the cliff down the valley, and I'm seeing reasons that I cannot reconcile in my brain, as a loyal Nigerian, I am bound to ask questions.
Perhaps in the coming days, we'll get more clarity and then answers to your questions. But then now, the federal government has promised to deliver 1 million conversion kits now with this initiative. But do you actually see Nigerians actually tapping into this initiative?
Well, I'm sorry if I will answer your question with a question. You're talking about 1 million conversion kits. How many vehicles, by your estimation, do we have in Nigeria? What's the population of Nigeria? You're talking about a country of about 200 million citizens, and you want to bring in 1 million conversion kits to convert how many cars? To the best of my knowledge, we have probably more than close to probably 20, 30, or 40 million cars.
But we need to start
so
from
what
somewhere.
would 1 million do?
We need to start from somewhere, which is probably what the federal government is doing.
Yeah, but when you want to start from somewhere, you start based on principles. You start based on concepts that work, because the world is driven or guided and led based on principles and concepts.
All right, now let's talk about the cost of conversion now. Of course, vehicle owners are to pay as much as 250,000 naira to convert a 6-cylinder engine. But how does this make the scheme more beneficial than petrol? Let me hear your view on that.
And that's. I'm sorry if I would also want to answer with almost a comment that is going to be like a question, and that's where the confusion comes in. You're talking about internal combustion engines. You're talking about different cars in Nigeria from different manufacturers, and different manufacturers have different specifications for their spare parts or for the components of their vehicles. We have probably 10 different cars in Nigeria from 10 different manufacturers. And I am being made to understand that I want to have a conversion kit that can go and be at resonance with those 10 different cars and 10 different engines. And that's why I said, please, sometimes, let's be fair to our citizens. I'm a technocrat, and technocrats are not supposed to be political. Technocrats are supposed to be objective. As an objective technocrat, I see more of confusion, but I still remain an optimist.
Yes, we need to stay optimistic. And then looking at it now, I mean, about 2 million jobs are expected to be created through this scheme. So what should the government do to attract private investors in this autogas scheme?
Well, when you come out with an approach, you must show the principles, you must show the modalities, and you must show the dynamics that will lead to crystallization. I keep using the word crystallization because it will be the thing, or it will be what will finally show what you have metamorphosed into. So when you say you want to create jobs, how? If you think, okay, in the process of doing that, you will have artisans, you will do this, you will do that, and that's how you want to create jobs, then I ask you a very simple question. You will create, if you feel you will create only maybe 2 million jobs in this, I can tell you that if you decide to bring our refineries on stream, the 4 refineries, you are likely to create more than 10 or 20 million jobs, because the taxi drivers will get jobs, the mama put sellers will have jobs, the carpenters will have jobs, the plumbers will have jobs. I'm not talking about the oil and gas engineers, oil and gas accountants, oil and gas environmentalists, oil and gas lawyers that will be working there. So let's be truthful as technocrats. Sometimes we should have the courage and boldness to let our leaders know that if they say we should go to the left, and we feel that going to the left is likely to be injurious to the economy and their image, we should be bold enough to tell them. And if there are other ways, or if in the coming days we're going to see explanation on how these jobs will be created outside what I analyze or explain, I will be a happy Nigerian to also see it, learn about it, and key into it.
Well, on a broader perspective now, as a key player in the oil and gas sector that you are now, how would you rate the government's push for more investment in the sector?
Well, it's very clear. Regardless, well, we know that we all experience the global pandemic. The global pandemic rubbished the thinking of pundits, political leaders, economic leaders, and national leaders. But we all accepted that because that was a pandemic. And I think we are yet to globally exit the pandemic. But on a realistic note, if you look at the Nigerian oil and gas industry, we now have probably a lot of basins, and we can see progress. Of course, everybody knows the Niger Delta as a prolific basin in terms of hydrocarbon endowment. We have also discovered hydrocarbon in the Dahomey Basin, which is like the Lagos axis. We have discovered hydrocarbon in the Anambra Basin. Recently, we have discovered hydrocarbon in the Benue Trough. We still have additional basins, like probably the Sokoto Basin, part of Gongola, and Bida Basin, and the Lake Chad Basin. What I can say, as far as I'm concerned as a practitioner, is that it's no longer the asset endowment, but it's the management of our human, material, and natural assets that matters. We should stop talking about economic vampires, economic traitors, and betrayers. Because every time we talk about that corruption, it just has to do with economic marauders. And we can do away with them if we want to.
Okay. Oil and gas analyst, Mr. Balazaka, thank you so much for sharing some of your time with us this morning.
Thank you.
We will be talking commodities when we return in just a moment. Don't go away. Welcome back. A research analyst at the financial derivatives company, Bolanle Agbaje, joins us now to discuss this morning's burning economic issues at the domestic commodities markets. Good morning, Bolanle. Thank you for joining us on the program.
Thank you for having me.
All right, let's just take it up from our last conversation. Now, of course, I believe you heard Mr. Balazaka, but then let me get your own thoughts about the federal government's auto gas initiative.
Yes, I think it's an initiative that is better than nothing. I'm sure they've, come up with this initiative based on what oil prices are trading at and the fact that, we're seeing pump price increase significantly. And like I mentioned before on Tuesday, we did talk about the fact that there was literally nothing the government can do because the pump price would definitely be reflective of what global prices are. But I do understand where the previous analyst was coming from, the fact that there's no nitty-gritty on, how the government is going to take up this initiative, and also the fact that it's only going to affect only a very insignificant part of the population. And obviously, he talks about the fact that power, which is our main, driver of economic growth and activity, hasn't really been, tackled. We've seen gas constraint of more than 1,000 megawatts so far, and that has to do with, the fact that gas is not, significantly contributing to power generation. So it's conflicting on how, we would get auto gas get cars that are converted to auto gas when we're seeing significant gas constraints when it comes to power generation.
Perhaps we'll see more clarity or get more clarity in the coming days as time goes on. Now, let's talk about oil prices now. Of course, we touched on, but it seems to be getting some support from the UK's licensing of the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine, of course. But before then, you know that the market had been quite volatile. Of course, that's ahead of the OPEC Plus meeting today. So how do we put all of this together?
So just looking at the backstory, in April this year, we had seen that, OPEC deepened their cuts by about 9.7 million barrels per day. And that was based on, after six months after that, they will decide on whether to further deepen cuts or start to ease out, the output cuts that they had initially agreed on. So I do understand where they're coming from. On one hand, you have countries like Nigeria and Iraq that are struggling with oil revenue, anti-governmental protests, and also the fact that, they're not able to cover their expenses. They have their budget deficits increasing significantly. And then you also have other countries that can obviously withstand, the further cuts and more concentrated on whether, oil prices will keep increasing further. But when you look at both sides, there's still huge risks. If OPEC decides to deepen its cuts, then what this will mean is obviously prices increase significantly, but at the expense of, Nigeria and Iraq most likely, not complying with this particular cut. And what would further happen with that is the fact that oil prices would not trade as high as we expect. And on the other hand, if, OPEC decides to not deepen its cuts and, start easing out this increasing production gradually, then there's a risk of offsetting the initial gains that we had seen so far. So I'm sure it's a lot to take and chew. And OPEC, they're meeting today and trying to decide, on what to do further.
And see which one would actually benefit Nigeria at the end of the day.
Exactly.
All right, let's talk about the Naira now. It's been appreciating at the parallel markets. It currently stands at about 485 to the dollar. Is this tied to the CBN's grant of unlimited access to forex remittances?
Yes, the CBN obviously would not just sit back and watch the Naira, get to as high as 500 Naira to the dollar. They're obviously working tirelessly to make sure that the exchange rate is reflective of what benefits the economy. And yes, so the increasing of, because the further depreciation of the exchange rate had to do with the low supply in the market. So they're looking for ways to increase supply. So that initiative supports, that. And also the fact that they've created they released a statement yesterday, a circular yesterday about, trying to manage liquidity as well, to further signal tightening of interest rates due to the fact that, we've seen inflation hit rocket high levels. And they're looking for ways to, make sure that the liquidity in the system is not, offsetting, the gains that they're trying to make with economic activity.
And so how is this in any way going to affect our reserves?
Well, it's definitely going to eat into our reserves, but I'm sure they're hopeful that all prices will keep climbing, and obviously other sources of our exchange rate, our external reserves as well. The fact that, diaspora remittances as well. That's why, the fact that they've signaled the unlimited access to the remittance, they're probably positive that, there's going to be increased remittance flow within the economy.
All right, now you touched on this a bit, and that's talking about the CBN circular on Tuesday about securitizing CRR funds. What would be the implications of this?
Well, it wouldn't necessarily. Well, we do expect that it would affect inflation rate, but not so soon. Why? Because inflation, what's driving inflation rate this high has to be structural. But regarding, curbing liquidity and, making sure that the demand or the increasing demand for dollar inflow or dollars has reduced significantly, that would definitely play into, the fact that they've securitized. So what's the explanation of what this securitization of the CRR refund is the fact that, as soon as 27.5% is the amounts that you give the CBN, and when they refund that back, it's usually refunded in cash. So what they do now is they're trying to make sure that they're deepening the the exchange rate market, in the sense that they do not, they wouldn't refund it as cash. They would more or less refund it as instruments that would, be managed by each individual within the economy.
So where does the stock market stand in all of this? Does this mean that the glorious days may begin to fizzle due to possible higher interest rates?
Well, yes, because, there'll be other assets that, would be more attractive when interest rates are high. We do expect that the stock markets wouldn't be trading, as high as it has been so far. And we're definitely going to be seeing some decline within the stock market space.
And I'm not sure that investors and the stock market may not be too happy about this. I mean,
well, with the increase in interest rates, it's definitely going to attract some investors. We do expect that, some foreign investors would see these high interest rates as something they can, profit from. And I'm sure that's what the CBN is looking at, and trying to monitor the dollar inflow through that as well.
All right, now let's talk about the World Bank Board now set to meet next week on Nigeria's $750 million power support loan. Well, of course, we know that this loan was approved in June or thereabouts, but what are your expectations?
We do expect that, when they do come to meet, they're probably going to, discuss on how this loan will be channeled through the power sector. The fact that, like I mentioned, power is a major issue, and it shouldn't be in this day and age. Like most developed countries don't have to struggle with, power generation, and it's the frontier of economic activity. Once you have power, then it reduces costs in different angles. So it's a great initiative, and we do expect positive outcomes. Not necessarily in the near term, just because investment in power is usually structural, and it takes a long time before, you can actually feel the effects on the power generation.
All right, now let's talk about the price of commodities. Now, you guys are saying that the price of flour is to increase again in the next 2 weeks. What exactly is going on? The prices keep...
Yes, like I mentioned, supply has been having a significant impact on, commodity prices recently. We've not seen any changes to demand specifically, but some of these companies are struggling to meet, with increasing cost and all that. And I'm sure a lot of, particularly with flour, some of the producing companies have try to make sure that, you know, they incorporate whatever the higher costs that they can, which they had done so far. But I think at this point, they're trying to offset, you know, the increasing costs by increasing prices of flour.
And this, in turn, would affect, you know, some byproducts such as bread,
Bread,
for instance.
yes,
Exactly,
yeah.
which is a common staple. So how do the people intend to cope with this increase in prices?
I guess in the short term, prices would be, you know, like bread, a loaf of bread goes for about 400 naira as we speak. We do see, you know, increases in bread, not up to 500, for example, but we do expect that prices would increase in the short term. But say Q2 2021, Q3, we definitely should see prices taper down.
But there's a trend. I mean, usually around once the price goes up, it hardly ever comes down.
No, it definitely will. It takes some time, but it will. Just because what had driven prices this high had to do with the COVID and then the lockdowns and all of that. But now that we're seeing vaccines roll out, everything is whatever is going on in the economy is now shining bright, or there's hope within the economy. So we do expect that, you know, the commodity prices should taper down as soon as, well, as early as Q2 next year.
All right, now, well, of course, we're still talking about commodity prices, but as we speak today, where are we in terms of prices? Have there been any, you know, rise in prices during Tuesday when you were here and today?
Well, no, not significant rise in prices, just because, you know, we are not seeing any increase in demand. Normally, if we had seen further increases in demand of some of these staples, then there will definitely be a significant rise in the prices of these commodities, but we're not seeing any of that now, just because disposable incomes are not, you know, increasing the way they should have during the month of December. December doesn't really feel like Christmas yet. People are not spending as much as they did last year. And so prices have more or less remained stable but high.
Stable but high.
Yes.
And in the coming days, the festive period is already just a matter of weeks away.
It's round the corner. Normally, the trend is during this time, you should see, you know, increasing demand, people around shopping, you know, buying gifts for their family members and all of that. But we're not seeing that this year. And coupled with that is the fact that nobody wants to, you know, contract the virus. So most people are not having any get-together or whatever like they would normally do in previous years.
But do you foresee any last-minute rush, perhaps, maybe, you know, just about that time, maybe?
Not really, no. We're already in the first week of December. Usually the rush comes in sometime in November. And now we're in December, there's no rush. You can't even feel it in the atmosphere. It's not just happening. People don't have the money.
And
everyone is
exactly.
just
I was just going to say that tells you a lot about the purchasing power.
Yes, the purchasing power is quite low at the moment. We're not even seeing, you know, family members come back for holidays. None of that is happening. Everybody's just going by their business, working to make sure that, you know, they can save for the future. I think it's a saving culture as we speak.
All right, so just before you go, I'd like to ask again, what will possibly be your outlook for oil prices in the coming days, and then agricultural commodities as well?
Well, with oil prices, it's still bleak because the fact that the meeting has gone on for this long, we're not too sure which direction it's going to go. But in the short term, we do expect oil prices to trade at about $48 to $50 per barrel, just because, you know, the UK has mentioned the fact that, you know, they're moving ahead with the vaccines, or the use of the vaccines from next week. That's positive news. And even the stock markets around the world are reacting to that. So when it comes to agri-commodities are, you know, moved or are channeled based on the improvements in China. Wheat, corn, they've shown mixed signals, but what's driving them is more or less the supply and demand factors. We're seeing increasing demand for the price for wheat and corn, which should, you know, boost prices. With cocoa, the fight between the chocolate processors and cocoa producers is still ongoing, but as a result, we should see increases in prices of cocoa. And then with sugar, we're seeing increasing supply in Brazil, and that's, you know, would more or less reduce prices or sugar in the near term.
But then, once again, talking about the federal government's auto gas initiative, do you see this having any impact in prices in the coming days? Is it possible?
No, not necessarily, no. It's a longer-term initiative. The signal, yes, might affect, prices. Most people would be more positive on, the outlook of the economy, but I don't see it making a lasting impact on, prices in the short term anyways, short to medium term.
All right, Bolanle Agbaje, research analyst at the FDC. Thank you once again for your time on the program. We'll take a moment now and we'll be right back. Well, let's just talk oil prices now. They are trading lower today, but still around $48 per barrel as producers, including Saudi Arabia and Russia, lock horns over the need to extend record production cuts set in place in the first wave of the COVID-19 pandemic. We'll talk about Brent crude now. It's down 0.04% at $48.23 a barrel in early trade, and U.S. oil was down 0.15% at $45.21 a barrel. Of course, we know that OPEC Plus resumes discussions today to agree on policies for 2021 after earlier talks produced no compromise on how to tackle weak oil demand amid a new coronavirus wave. Of course, we have our eyes on the developments coming from that space and we'll continue to update you as they come. But for now, let's check out yesterday's numbers from the NSE, where the bear staged a comeback as sell-offs of large caps like Nigerian breweries, GT Bank and Zenith Bank caused the oil share index to record its first loss in 7 consecutive trading sessions. The total volume of trades increased by 19.7% to 368.97 million units. Well, let's talk to stockbroker Abdurrashid Momo, who joins us now for more analysis. Good morning, Mr. Momo. Thank you for joining us on the program. So we saw the bear return to the market yesterday. Any idea what actually happened?
Basically, we've been enjoying a very long bull trend, and the market scenario is like a ping pong ball. When you bounce it, it gains momentum, and with time, it starts to lose momentum. So that's what we are seeing. It's not a surprise. Market can't keep going up all the time. We're in a phase where we need corrections. We are beginning to see corrections. For now, prices are range bound. And as I've always said, we always have 2 types of players in the market: the investors and the traders. So what's happening now is that for the investors, it's still a good deal, because we know from the Q3 financials we've seen, it's still going to be, a bull rally into end of December and into when most of these dividends are paid. But basically what we are seeing, and all those huge momentum are making 50, 60, 70%. Now, if you are still a trader, you look at between 5 to 10% profit taking. And for me, I still feel there'll still be more corrections to the downside before we'll finally get a next bull rally.
So how long do you see this correction going on for?
These corrections, normally market trends for the month of December, for the last 10 years, the market for December has always been a positive one. And, because these are the periods where most of the companies will be doing their year-end, apart from the last day of trading in December, which will be more, I call it in quotes, window dressing, good pricing mechanism. Definitely more investors, more investors are what they call dividend driven. So they want to key into getting those dividends, because when you compare the dividend payout compared to what the money market is paying, it's still a very good deal. Example I'll give you is GTB stock. With what we have, there's still possible that they're going to pay a 2.50 Naira dividend. If you look at it compared with current price, it's still more than 10%, which no money market instrument can give to you now.
Stockbroker Abdurrashid Momo, thank you for your input on the program this morning. All right, we'll make an opening call to London when we return in just a moment. Do stay with us. Juliana Olayinka joins us now from our London studio for this morning's headlines. Good morning, Juliana. PM Boris Johnson has warned of a possible logistical challenges during in distributing the vaccines. He's saying that it could even take months before the most vulnerable are vaccinated. What are his reasons? And I hope this is not some sort of disappointing news.
Good morning, Bissy. No, this is certainly not disappointing news. I think, the fact that Britain have become the first country in the world to be, distributing this vaccination is still a good news story that will keep us happy until the end of the spring. And I think it was only right that Prime Minister Boris Johnson, in his televised address yesterday, was optimistically cautious, because we know that even in war, towards the end of the war, people still die, and we still have the highest COVID rate in the country. And the fact that this monumental, historic scientific breakthrough news happened to fall on the day that England was coming out of a national lockdown, it was very wise that the tone that was struck was very balanced, just to remind people, especially in the run-up to Christmas, that COVID is still very much with us, and it will take a long time to administer the dosages. We are expecting an arrival anytime now. It could be today. We've got hundreds of British media all been sent to Belgium to watch this Pfizer-BioNTech vaccination leave the place where it's being shipped to come into Britain. There's a huge task force being developed as we speak. There is a new minister who is in charge of administering the dosage. But one of the reasons why last week's announcement by Oxford AstraZeneca, even though it was the third announcement of a breakthrough in the vaccine, was really celebrated, was because it's much cheaper and you can store it in a normal refrigerator. Whereas with the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine, the vaccine that we have been given the green light to administer, it has to be stored at sub-zero temperatures. Now, there is a list of who will be receiving the vaccine first, and the priority are people over the age of 80 and those who are vulnerable in care homes, as well as frontline NHS staff. And so one of the difficulties comes with the care homes because you cannot shift the vaccine around too many times. It has to remain in that sub-zero temperature. I believe there are 980 packs at 980 vaccinations for individuals in one pack. It's very complicated. Of course, I'm not a health professional, but there are reasons as to why it will be very difficult. But of course, given just how crippling COVID-19 is, of course, we've had almost 60,000 deaths. Nigeria hasn't had that much, but clearly it has killed people. This is a monumental story, something that, Britain and the rest of the world can be very, very proud of. And so the fact that it's going to take weeks and months to deliver it to anybody is as to be expected, of course.
I guess patience just remains the watchword here. Now, two of the UK's biggest supermarkets, that's Morrisons and Tesco, are to pay more than £850 million in business rates relief they received from the government to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic. But can you shed more light on this story?
Well, it's actually 4 now. I spoke about this with Chimeze yesterday. Tesco became the first big 4 supermarket chain to say that they would be giving back 585 million of the 859 million pounds they received in business rates relief. We have spoken extensively about this. A lot of people will know about the furlough scheme or the job retention scheme, which the government were paying to keep people employed. Well, behind the scenes, to keep, the lights on for many businesses, what the government did is they took away or gave a holiday for business rates. And it was discovered that £1 in every £6 of these rates relief were given to the big 4 supermarket chains. That became pretty controversial because whereas a lot of the other non-essential retailers had to close during both lockdowns, retailers that were selling essential items such as food were able to stay open. And anybody that's been to a big supermarket here in the UK will know that they also sell clothes, they sell homeware, and particularly in this last lockdown, supermarkets have seen their profits rise exponentially because people, of course, haven't had anywhere else to shop for Christmas goods. So that was controversial, particularly as Tesco then decided to reinstate their dividend. So questions were arising as to how they were able to receive these hundreds of millions of pounds from the taxpayer and still get record surging profits. So Tesco made the move yesterday. They said it was the right thing to do. That was swiftly followed by Morrison's, the fourth largest grocer here. And then just before I came into the studio, Sainsbury's and then Aldi, one of the smaller chains, have also decided to do that. We're still waiting to hear whether Asda and Lidl will follow suit. They likely will, because we do know that Chancellor Rishi Sunak is desperate to put money back into the coffers. And there has been speculation that anybody that has had monumental profits during this time will have to pay back some of that money. So I think, the supermarket chains were doing it just before the government come knocking.
All right, and finally, Juliana, HSBC has seen its share price surge more than 50% since touching a 25-year low in September. What's driving the numbers up?
Well, they did have that 25-year low, and even though they have seen their share price surge, it's still been a really bad year for HSBC, and their share price isn't as what it was this time last year. There are a number of things. Of course, with every downturn in 2020, everybody will blame COVID-19, and that's pretty much valid. Profitability for banks across the world has been really difficult. HSBC is Britain's #1 bank. We have historically low interest rates here at 0.1% in the UK at the moment. Can't really earn much on that, as well as impairment figures. So many banks have had to put aside so much for bad loans and bad debt because governments across the world, of course, have been ushering in these pretty fast turnaround business loans, not really doing checks and balances. So HSBC are expecting to lose hundreds of millions of pounds of that. And then, of course, given the fact that Asia is their second biggest market, they got caught up in a lot of these Hong Kong riots. A lot of people turned their back on them when they publicly, very controversially, backed China's national security laws. And bringing it back closer to September, when it did hit that 25-year low, HSBC were embroiled in a money laundering scam where regulators did find, allegedly, that HSBC turned a blind eye to people shifting millions of pounds around the world under their name. So it hasn't been great. But they seem to have benefited, as have global markets, from this positive COVID-19 news. The fact that we can actually finally see the beginning of the end of COVID-19 is wonderful. They've obviously benefited from that, especially because Britain is the first country in the world to administer a World Health Organization vaccination, and they are the biggest bank here. And, of course, they are doing so much restructuring. They're reducing the number of their staff. They're looking at taking away some of their less profitable markets and putting it in products that are doing well. So, there are several reasons as to why HSBC are on the bounce back, but they are still historically lower than they were this time last year.
Thank you, Juliana. We'll see you again in the afternoon.
Thank you.
And just before we wrap up today's program, on a programming note, we'd like to inform our viewers that the special town hall program by the Policy and Legal Advocacy Centre, PLAC, which will air between 5:30 p.m. and 7:30 p.m. today. It's a special program which brings together key stakeholders to speak on issues relating to police reforms and the Police Act 2020 as signed by President Muhammadu Buhari. Follow the conversation using the hashtag #PoliceReformNG. Join us at 5:30 p.m. right here on Channels Television. And that's our program today. Thank you for watching. I am Bisi Adebayo.